Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel and thanks for supporting the Peso Pro episodes. If you're new here, I'm PPE and we're gonna talk about money management tips and peso tricks. If you haven't done so yet, please hit the subscribe button and the notification bell. Today, we're gonna talk about the 5 money mistakes that I did in my 20s. These are a result of me thinking about what were the things that I actually did in my 20s that had I known things I know now, I wouldn't have made the same decisions. The first one is keeping a big balance in the bank. And when I say bank, it's really a deposit account. What I used to know was when you're in your teens or when you were a kid, you can probably still remember the time when your parents brought you to open up a kiddie saver savings account in your local bank. And the one of the most common lessons that you were taught when you were a kid was to actually save and put in regular amounts of money, be it from your side jobs or a side business, or sometimes even from the gifts from relatives and friends. This is a common practice or a common lesson that you were taught when you were young. And so it's also one of those that will ideally and hopefully stick. There's nothing wrong about savings, but when you get into adulthood and when you start really earning for yourself, sometimes you'll realize that savings enough will not make you rich or will not even just keep up with the way things are inflating or the prices going up every year. In the past decade, inflation in the Philippines has been about 2 to 4%. And with bank rates typically only at about 0.25 to 0.5% at max, you're essentially setting yourself up for failure. Me keeping an amount in the bank for so long was a big mistake for me because had I known other things or other investment vehicles, I could have probably parked some more money in those that will earn much higher than the inflation rate, or even sometimes take advantage of the growth because I was starting very early. The second money mistake is linked to the first one, which is not taking advantage of compounding interest much earlier on. If I remember correctly, I started telling my friends who were into investments that I was very afraid of the stock market then. I did not understand how, and I was victim to the same message track that is being taught by mainstream media or even some news articles that you read, that the stock market is very volatile, it can go up and down, you can lose a lot of money. People actually lost their pensions, and recall the crash of 2008 in the US when essentially the stock market lost almost half of its value. Those were things that I can still remember because those are the times when I was in college years and very fresh out of that. I still remember the stories that I've heard when the market crashed. Little did I know that sometimes these things are really inevitable, and if you just widen the horizon and if you learn the basics of investing, you can actually protect yourself against them. These are realities that are there because it's inherent in the investment portfolio, but as you embrace the realities, you're also able to get in there and take the potential gains for yourself. If you fast forward to 2018 to 2020, that same market crash in the US has now technically been erased, and the value of your money would have been doubled if you invested at around that time, which is around that time I entered the workforce. That's one money mistake that I regret now in hindsight, but I'm now worried that investing in stocks is not really about gambling. Essentially, if you are diversifying, if you're learning about the companies you invest in, and you understand the time horizon that you're putting yourself into. If you understand and if you try to learn as much as you can, you're gonna be protecting yourself for the long term while you having now the guts to actually invest in something that still can be vague but can also be very potentially rewarding in the long term. The third money mistake is all about sales being a driver for buying more. And essentially, I was also prey to the trap of big companies or even department stores who essentially hold sales almost on a very regular basis, because what they do is they come up with events tied to, for example, seasonal occasions like Valentine's or maybe back to school or even Christmas. Now, in the world of digital, these sales can be much easier to exercise or to do, because what they will just do is they will essentially just launch new banners in their app and push email marketing to you. When I was in my 20s, sales were a bit more physical, where they would set up midnight madness sales, if you guys remember that still. Essentially, people will go to the malls, flock them very early and stay until the wee hours or until 12 midnight to actually keep lining up and paying for stuff. In most cases, items are heavily discounted here, and while I do love a good sale, I also found that in most cases, you're also led to believe that you need things, or you're shown many things that you really don't need but you end up buying just because it's 20, 30, or 50% off. What I've learned over the years is that I can actually reverse the effect of these sales on me when I prepare for what are the things that I need to buy during the sale and hold off for a couple of weeks, because now we're realizing that the sales are not very random or very scarce anymore. They essentially happen every month, every time there's a double digit. So what you can do as a consumer is to take advantage of these sales for your end by planning ahead and putting a limit in the amount that you spend. One good way that I try to do this for myself is buying Christmas presents for people I need to buy gifts for, like inaanaks or nieces and nephews. When you buy stuff nearer to Christmas Day, typically you'll be buying at or a little below the regular price, but if you buy these during the big sales prior to the Christmas season, which is essentially 11/11 or Black Friday or 12/12, you tend to get better deals on items that you would anyway buy because these were the things that you were planning for. What I try to do to stretch the peso that I reserve for gifts is to try to understand what items are on sale, come up with a few ideas on what would be good gifts for these kids or these friends that you need to buy gifts for, and stick to a list. If you have a total amount of money set aside for gifts and a total list that you can buy items for, then you're much able to identify what are the good deals that will match still within your budget and you not to go overboard with just buying, because essentially what the apps or e-commerce sites will build their sales against is for you to be under time pressure, especially when there's a 12 to 2 a.m. time pressure for you to buy the item so that you get the best deal. In most cases also, when I learned some of the tricks that they do is sometimes the 12 to 2 a.m. sale is only about 5% better than the regular sale in the rest of the day, which gives you more time to think, do you really need the item, or are you just being forced to buy the item because you think that there's a sense of urgency? Also, the other tip on this mistake that I did in my 20s is for you to actually think about, was this item on sale in the previous sale? A good example case that you can look back to will be the past 12/12 and 11/11 sale. In a lot of different official stores or in, say, Lazada or Shopee, you would practically see the same discounts on both items, but in both cases, they all presume to be very time-sensitive, must-buy now items that you then fall through because you will now buy because you felt there was an urgency and you may be missing out on the sale if you did not buy. The reality is these companies will have these items on sale on the next round, and you can still use that extra month to think about, do you really need or do you really have plans to buy that item, and probably make a better decision than when you were pressured to buy it in the first 2 hours of the day. The fourth money mistake that I did has something to do with sales and general purchases, which is having installments pile on top of each other, or the buy now, pay later, or pay in 6 months or 12 months installment schemes that you typically see in malls or in your favorite retail stores. This has become more of a common offering across banks and credit cards, and I think almost all credit cards would have in some way a 0% installment deal tacked onto that credit card. In the past, these were seasonal deals that you would only see during Christmas time or when there's a big sale of the department store, but now these are more common and they typically happen almost on a normal basis as long as you buy a minimum purchase of 3 or 5,000 pesos. What I learned is at that point of purchase, whenever you see the bill, for example, you bought a 3,000 peso purchase divided by 6 months, it only looks like a 500 peso bill, which makes it very appealing and very mundane or very simple to sort of catch up with. You would sometimes think na kaya ko naman pala kasi 500 na naman per month. What they want you to think is that it's easily payable, it's very light on the pocket, so go ahead and buy. I'm not saying installments are a bad thing. I actually use them quite a lot, especially when it makes sense. Especially for big purchases that you want to at least amortize across 2 or 3 years. For example, when I buy my phone or when I buy my watch, I try to amortize it over 2 or 3 years so that the cost is spread out during the time that I'm actually using the item. However, the deal is if you don't keep track of the number of installments that you buy, you tend to make different purchase of 500 per month, 400 per month, 800 per month, and sooner or later you'll end up realizing that you're now paying for say 4 or 5,000 per month in installments. The hard part is that when you're in it, then you're in it for the long haul itself. Because now you have to pay the 5,000 not only for 6 months, sometimes or also 12-month installment, making it hard for you to plan the future because there may be uncertainties that you cannot foresee at the moment of purchase. The tip here is for you to think about if I can purchase this item with cash that I have saved up for, it's more often advisable to buy that using straight purchase using your credit card, meaning don't take it on installment and just settle the amount right away. Therefore, you're able to manage cash better and you don't run into the trap of having installment purchases pile up. And lastly, the fifth money mistake that I did in my 20s was actually falling into the trap of following the latest trends. In most cases, this can be a purchase of a gadget which has been very, very on the rise when I was in my 20s. Like the iPhone was very, very new. It was the hippest thing. There were also a lot of new gadgets that were coming into play. And sometimes you're led to believe by traditional marketing that you actually need this stuff. One trend in my 20s also, which I still think continues until today, is the travel bug, which basically had everyone flying into places because airfare was its all-time cheap and it was very, very hip or very, very in for you to travel multiple times in a year. Now with COVID, that's probably not the case, but I'm sure all of us want to travel again. In my 20s, I did this a lot. Some of the things that I still remember and I still cannot imagine how I decided to actually take the decision was when I did a couple of small trips to the same destinations within a 2 to 3 year period. So essentially going back to the same destination only after a short amount of time. What that ended up was, I still enjoyed those trips, don't get me wrong, but you also miss out on maximizing the experience because when you're there, you're thinking, oh, I can always go back again. And also, at the same time, you're also missing out to visit other places that you have not seen before, which then creates another need to go to those places again, which then the spending snowballs. The other one related to this mistake is me purchasing an iPad before. When it came out, it sounded like a cool thing that you can do things on a tablet and not necessarily doing it on your phone or in your laptop. I ended up buying the iPad and actually just using it maybe less than 10 times. I sort of regretted that. Thankfully, was able to give that to someone who needed it. But in most cases, when you buy an item, you're led to believe that you need it because of the strong marketing push. These companies study our psychologies, and now even with the age of social media, they even know what we search for and suggest ads almost immediately after you search for a term in Google or in Facebook. So in a lot of cases, you technically don't really intend on buying, but with marketing so sophisticated now, they can actually give you specialized promos that will lead you to think that, okay, this is really a good deal and you can get a lot of value from it. Now I learned that when I am confronted or faced with a new gadget or new item, I tend to take a couple of weeks, if not months, for me to really think through if I need it and if I can justify it to myself and if I have the savings to buy that, then it may make sense to buy. But in most cases, what this has opened my eyes to was you technically don't need a lot of these new items, especially if the one you're using now is still working. And that has probably saved me a lot of money because now I can give myself the right amount of time to think and not be subjected to the wonderful world of marketing and the messaging that these companies give you. Those are the 5 money mistakes that I was able to recall in my 20s that I hope, had I known better, I shouldn't have done them, but I'm sharing them with you so that you can at least learn from it and try to open your eyes and minds to these possible scenarios that can also happen to you. If you feel lost on what to do next or where are you in your financial independence journey, we have this video that we're gonna link here so that you can follow the 8 pro steps towards financial independence. You knowing where you currently are will be one step further than most people, because if you know where you currently are, then you know what next step to take. I hope this was of value to you, and I'll see you on the next one.